Hey everybody, welcome back to We're Not Dead Yet, episode 9. And yes, the triumphant, the trio, the MMP gang is all here. Welcome to COG number 3, Perry Cocke. Hey Perry, what's going on?
Together again for the first time. Great to
Yes.
join you guys. And I
Yep.
gotta say,
No.
I've been watching, y'all been doing a great job, so, keep up the good work.
Well, it's fun. I mean, we're talking about stuff that we like, and we enjoy, which makes it so much easier. And co-host Brian, yes, they're the normal guy. So, by the way, Garrick is going to be placing ASL Hall of Fame under your name, and then under my name, he's going to be placing in No Hall of Fame.
By the way, I'm actually in 2 Hall of Fames.
Stop.
So I'm in the ASL Hall of Fame, which I totally did not want, and I am 100% in the Clausewitz Hall of Fame for wargaming. So 2 Hall of Fames. No rings, though.
Yeah.
So what are you gonna do?
I understand y'all wear hats, so I
Yep.
brought my hat with me
There
here.
we go.
Gotta wear a hat.
There we go.
I wear a hat
Yeah.
to keep the heat in, because quite frankly, there's not a whole lot of heat retention going on here.
But when I'm outside, yeah, I'm wearing a hat for that. Yeah. And that shade my eyes, both of them.
So,
Nice hat, by the way. Nice hat.
hey Brian, let's clean house. What do we got? Any items we want to catch up for before we launch into the meat and potatoes?
Absolutely. First thing, and the hot item on everybody's mind is, are we having winter offensive? Where are we having winter offensive? We have spent months basically looking for a site to hold winter offensive. We are in the unique position of having too many people and not enough money. So the hotels where we've been looking, they want to charge literally $24,000 for the space. Understand, we take all the money we receive for winter offensive and give it to the World War II Foundation. So we could pay 24,000 for space, and then the World War II Foundation would get basically nothing. Not an option. So we went a different direction. We're going back to Bowie. I know some people are going to groan about that. There's been questions about the security of Bowie. Our solution to this is we have hired a private security firm, and we'll have guards on duty every night from 10 p.m. to 8 a.m., which is when all the issues happen down there, along with the security guard that works for the hotel, the same security guard that said there's too many people for me to deal with last year. We hope it's a workable solution. It should be. Space-wise, we get a ton of space. The best hotel we could have found, we would have had to limit winter offensive to 135 people. We did not want to do that. We haven't been that small in basically since the year after COVID, maybe. And before that, we were twice that number. So it just wasn't an option to move. We're going to keep trying to look, but this could be a 1-year thing. The big thing is hiring security basically saves us about, from the best location we could find, $6,500. I'd rather give the World War II Foundation $6,500 than a hotel that basically laughed at me when I asked, hey, how about making a charitable donation? The guy literally, the manager of the hotel literally looked at me and was like, I could rent that space for $10,000, giving it to you for 6. I was like, okay, thanks for the
Yeah.
favor.
Yeah, because we all know hotel space is in incredible demand. So yeah, I get that.
It's difficult. I mean, it's just we're at a weird size because we're a little too big, but we just aren't quite big enough to get a legitimate good space. Anyways, back in Bowie, where it's been for, I don't know, 32 of 35 years, so it's familiar to everyone. It is the weekend of, and this is the second most important thing, January 29th through February 1st. This should be the weekend prior to the Super Bowl when there is no football being played. Thumbs up for that, although the odds of me seeing the Commanders seem pretty low after Dallas destroyed them today, so I'm not too happy about that.
Boo-hoo. Boo-hoo.
Let's just hope it's not another stinking Kansas City, Philadelphia affair.
Well, we know it won't be Baltimore, so I'm okay with that.
Not going to be Baltimore. On that note,
First, I just want to say thanks for all the hard work on that,
Yeah,
Brian. I know how
that
tough it
wasn't.
was, man.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I'm going to second Perry. I know there was a ton of work, and the most important point that you made there, and you kind of threw it under the rug, but it's true, and I know it. We're going to keep working to find an optimal solution.
right. There's got to be a better solution.
Right.
We just have to find it.
Well, we look back at Hunt Valley, and we've looked at a lot of different places, and you'll continue to do so, but we will find an optimal solution at some point that isn't in Bowie. And because I know there's people that will not come this year because of it, and that's unfortunate.
And that's the Comfort Inn.
Yes. The Comfort Inn at Bowie, literally the same place it's been. I will be posting after we're done recording the podcast all the information, links you'll need, and things of that nature. You know, and it could be a 1-year deal. It could be just getting us. It buys us time essentially. And hopefully, fingers crossed, it'll all work out, and you know, the security that we're hiring will do their job, and the problems will go away, and we'll be in much better shape. Let me see. Secondly, Code 8 contest. This must have been a lot trickier than I thought it would be because only 12 people replied. Don't give up the ship, guys. You know, it's a pretty simple email and you have a chance of winning a cool prize. This week, Rick, once again, a name I'm going to butcher, Zanaski, Niezanaski, had the correct answer, which is a late war SS squad that fails by its ELR number and rolls a 12 ends up with a reduced half squad, broken half squad. They do suffer
Of lesser
ELR.
quality, right?
Yeah, of lesser quality. So, you know, if it's 658, it becomes a 2-3. What is the next one down? 238.
238, yeah.
Okay.
As opposed to normally, it would just reduce to 2 normal half squads
Right.
if it fails its ELR.
Yeah, you wouldn't even care.
Well, and then one would die.
Right.
One
Oh,
would
12. Yes.
A half squad's always dying when you roll a 12. So, I mean, that's got to happen. Anyways, Rick, we will be sending out Action Pack 21 to you on Monday because that's the running joke, of course. You know, Action Pack 21 is focused on, if you watched our review from Curt and I the other day, early war scenarios. So you won't have to worry about SS failing their ELR.
Blitzkrieg to Paris.
Blitzkrieg to Paris is the name, and there's a 7-minute review video out there you can go search for. I think that catches everything up. Later in the episode, we will give episode 9's contest. It'll probably be towards the end like we usually do.
So I'd like to, you got any more? Sorry.
No, I was going to say, however, I was going to segue into what the purpose of this week's podcast is, but let's hear what Perry has to say first.
So I wanted to harken back to your discussion about AP21. And Curt mentioned that, you know, when we said we were going to get the 3 products out for ASLOC, you know, there were people saying, nah, you'll never do that. You'll never do that. And I didn't say we'll never do that, but I got to admit, I was a little skeptical that we would actually do it. The only reason we did it, or the only reasons we did it, was because I have a great proofing team, you know, working on the scenarios. And when I say proofing, that's really just as much development as it is proofing, getting everything into the format, the consistent format that ASL players, I think, want to see. They don't want to see the same thing said 3 different ways. They want to see it said one way. And in addition to that, it was having very cooperative designers. Pete Schelling, you know, would answer every question we had about, you know, did you mean this? Did you mean that? And then y'all were talking about Pete being, you know, the force behind Action Pack 20. I want to shout out to Brett Hildebrand as well, you know, who runs Oktoberfest. You know, he was sort of coordinating everything for these ASLOC action packs, Action Pack 20. And so Pete's the designer. Most of them, he wasn't the only designer, and especially in this one, there were several other designers. And so, you know, Brett was the coordination between all of them, and then the main point of contact with us. And then for Action Pack 21, Gary Fortenberry, he designed all the scenarios. So, and he was a point of contact for us with that. And he was answering questions whenever we needed them. Like I said, I was skeptical we'd be able to do it, but I said, well, we're going to try. And we tried and we made it. And so thanks to those designers and Brett, and then to the team that I was referring to for the scenarios for these packs, that would be Chaz Argent, who does the final layout for them, and then Klaus Malmstrom, who is involved with every rules discussion that I have, and also with all the ASL wording. He's better at the consistent ASL wording than I am. And then J.R. Tracy, who was on one of your programs earlier, he brings player experience, and he also brings a good command of the English language and historical research. So some of the narratives that we get for the scenarios, the intros and the aftermaths, some of them are a little shaky sometimes. And JR is a big help in buffing them up. And so big shout out to all those people for us being able to deliver those packages on time for Oktoberfest.
Let me just add a real important point to that, Perry, as one of the playtest coordinators. It's not an accident or a slip that we made those 3 products deadlines at ASOC because of the quality and the thoroughness of the design of the submissions. The Schelling group and the Fortenberry group, and there's a couple other groups that do it as well, have gained an enormous amount of confidence from us in that when they submit stuff, there's a comfort level on our end that they're not doing it blind. They've been play tested to a degree by very good players, and we have a certain level of expectation with those 2 group submissions. And there's like I said, a couple other guys, but we have an expectation level that we don't have for other submitters and other designers because people just don't know or just don't, they want to hand off and walk away. And both of those groups they've been incredible contributors to the hobby for decades now, but the level of their submissions has always been super high. And that's if you're looking to submit stuff and people, one of the complaints we've always heard is it takes too long to do things. And a lot of times it doesn't take too long. It just takes longer when we get stuff that's farther away from being able to publish. And as we've grown and as the hobby's aged, you can look at a couple. Andy Rogers, Bill Cirillo are just a couple of names of people who submit stuff that is always, always farther along than most general submissions. And so hats off to those guys and those groups, because it is a kind of a thankless job in some sense. And it certainly doesn't put anybody in a mansion in Beverly Hills in doing so, but we are greatly appreciative of those groups that go above and beyond.
And as a playtest coordinator, I wasn't mentioning playtesters at all, and who are the backbone of a lot of what we do. And then you're absolutely correct about the quality of submissions having a big impact on how soon something can come out.
Right.
Now, then, I think when you were talking about AP21, you also mentioned some errata we just issued about the Carpiquet scenarios where the hangars are factories, and we didn't have that in the Carpiquet SSRs. And that's entirely on me because that was in the submission and I took it out. I said, we don't need to say they're factories. Brian, what's the difference between a 1-hex building with a road going into it and a factory, 1-hex factory with a road going into it?
Are you literally asking me?
Yes.
Well, I have no idea.
I thought there was none, but I was wrong. So you can
if it makes you feel better, we do all blame you for this mistake. And I'm pretty sure that the office has been throwing a slip in with every order, so everybody knows that they are factories.
You can fall into the basement, into the cellar of a regular old 1-hex building, but factories don't have cellars. And you can just drive right into a factory on the road. And I thought you could just drive right into a building on a road. If a road went into the building, I thought you could just drive right into it, but you can't. You can a factory. There's plenty of buildings with roads going into them. You can't just drive in there.
Let me understand this correctly. If we don't say it's a factory, a building with a road going into it isn't a factory?
Correct.
We have to actually say
there's some gun setup stuff too, Perry, right?
Brian.
Yeah, absolutely. There's gun setup stuff. You couldn't put an 88 building.
And you can't put it in a factory either unless you say you can. And we say you can in Carpiquet. You have to say you can.
And we got that right.
Brian, think about board 1. The big giant building in board 1, it has a road going onto it. Is it always a factory? No, it's not always a factory.
Does it have a road going into it?
Yes.
All right. Garrick, make sure you throw a picture of road 1 up. I don't believe this at all.
Board 1, there's a big gray building with the road going into it. Gary will throw that up there.
That absolutely has been in Squad Leader and ASL for what, 50 years now, and that has a road going into it?
Yeah.
I think you guys are lying to me, but that's okay. We'll see a picture and then I'll trust you. Let's get to the meat of why we asked Perry here today. Other than the fact that, he's an owner of MMP and we want him on the podcast as much as he wants to be on the podcast. We want to talk about Journal 16. I've seen some stuff. I've seen Frenzy used on Facebook. I think the frenzy is just coming from a couple of people. And I think there's even a poll going on right now about the rules that were changed, et cetera, et cetera. It's been a little eye-opening. The whole process for me, there was a ton of what I thought were really good suggestions. And Perry's the rules guy, and Perry went over it, and, we accepted 25%, I think, or 20% of the rules suggestions. Which is fine to me. I mean, 20% of anything is a good deal. I thought some cool stuff was missed. I disagree. We are in a democracy, though. There's no kings at MMP, as far as I can know. I'm just throwing that out there. But we want to talk about some of the rules. So, Perry, if you could real quick, just summarize the important rules that changed.
Hold on. Before you do this, Perry, let me back up and give everybody a quick summation of how we got here. Some of the best players in the world, Mike McGrath, Steve Pleva, and a bunch of others, have been building house rules of their own for decades. And they sat down and said, hey, actually, it was a conversation. It kind of went like this. Mike came to me and said, change the human wave rules. You just need to turn this word to this word and it fixes everything. And I said, well, no, it really doesn't fix everything. And that's not how you go about trying to get a rules change. Write it up, blah, blah, blah. So he did. They did. And they put together a very long document that they sent us about all of the rules that they have a problem with or think that are broken and what they would like to see as the solution. Brian and I looked at it and we were like, oh, this looks cool. This looks cool. Yeah, I like this. Okay. And then Perry looked at it, and as is wont, Perry went no, yes, okay, yes. And we had a lot of back and forth. And Brian and I were pushing and pulling, and Perry was tugging, and that was how we got what you got.
Understand. A lot of people come to us with rules problems and this change. And the reality is, when you listen to it, it usually is tied into a story where they got burnt by a rule,
right,
and now don't care for it.
And it bleeds into design submissions where you see a scenario with SSRs that are longer than the intro and aftermath combined, and they end up being, these SSRs should be called rules I don't like and want to be changed for this scenario. And that happens more and more, which again is fine.
There's a technical term for that. It's a grudge rule.
A grudge rule. Okay. All right. But that was how we got here. And so that led into Perry and getting this large document written up. And Perry, what I wanted you to kind of angle in with is start by, what were your first impressions when you saw this thing, and how did you go about picking and choosing what you did?
Okay. Well, my first impression was that these guys really don't like the rules. Jeez whiz. I thought they liked playing this. And that colored my initial impression. But I got over that and was able to look at it with more of an open mind. The suggestions are coming from Mike and Steve, and they got input from other people. But those other people aren't making the suggestions. They just gave various input on. And so, so they didn't agree with all the suggestions. And Mike and Steve don't agree with each other on everything either, but that's okay. And that kind of sums up to, on one hand, how a lot of rules changes are. Some people like them, some people don't like them. And then so then it comes to somebody to decide, well, which ones do we think are worthwhile doing and which ones we don't. I have a fairly conservative view on these things.
For the record, it's the only thing I know of that you're fairly conservative on.
I was just thinking the same thing, but I wasn't going to say it.
Not liberal in this one case.
So my first recommendation is anybody who's interested in any of this is get the journal and read the submission, read the article that replies to it, and then read each of the suggestions and responses. But I'll certainly go over some of my thinking and then the three major changes, and then maybe some of the changes that I know you all would like to see. So if it ain't broke, don't fix it. There's stuff in the ASL in the rule book we're still finding stuff that's wrong, just plain wrong. And
rules, excuse me.
And it doesn't work with the other rules. There's plenty of stuff in there that could use clarification. It confuses people. And we've sort of been trying to limit ourselves to what's just plain wrong, doesn't work with the others, doesn't play well with the other rules, or that's very confusing. Now, we're open to new ideas. Just witness all the historical modules that we do that have new ideas. And then say for instance, the 537s that we just added, they were in St. Mary Glees in a historical module, and then we brought them into the core rules in Twilight of the Reich, and along with the late war SS that that made their original appearance in A Bridge Too Far as SS that can reduce in quality, go to a 548 and 447. So we brought that into the base set of the rules. We try and make progress where it seems to work, but without without putting our foot on the accelerator. Now,
So Perry, let me ask you a question real quick. You just mentioned your take on the rules, that there's stuff. You said there's stuff that is broke. Can you give me an example of something you think that's broke that isn't fixed yet or needs to be fixed?
No. If I knew it was broken, could be fixed, I'd be here in Iraq.
Yeah, but I think, for example, for a long time people have felt the whole the foxhole thing was broken. Why are foxholes different than shell holes?
Yeah, well, that's in Iraq. That's what I'm saying.
Right, but I would argue.
Fixed. Okay.
Right, no, I would argue that's something that's been decades in the making, and why wasn't it fixed before, or why now?
So why not before? Because we've been doing other stuff. I think I would qualify it as more important stuff. Now you can argue with that. Getting new stuff out. I'd say getting new stuff out. That's what people want to see. And not everyone agrees that those rules are broken. And nobody came up with a suggestion of how to fix them. Right. And should we have fixed them sooner? I guess you could say we're fixing them now. We should have fixed them back in the second edition rule book. Back when we did the second edition rule book 25 years ago, that was a very conscious decision to try and change as little as possible. We just wanted to clean things up, but we didn't, and we changed a few things, a little stuff, but we didn't want to make any major changes because it was enough to just clean everything up.
Redoing the rule book was a monumental job in and of itself. Adding rule changes throughout would have been, to me, and I think we all agreed, would have been a nightmare.
So now we're changing some stuff. And Brian asked me for the major changes, and the three major changes are, I think, the entering and exiting an entrenchment, foxhole or a trench, not a connected trench, but a trench by itself. So you can make that in one simultaneous move if you're using assault movement. OBA or residual firepower in the foxhole hex, that'll still hit you when you're moving in or out of the foxhole. But if somebody wants to shoot you, you have to wait until in your assault movement, you have to wait until the complete move is made. Now, there are people who said, you didn't need to do that. It worked fine the way it was. Why'd you do that? Well, they're certainly in the minority. I think we know that the majority of people thought that the foxholes were death traps, and therefore the foxhole rule was broken. And so, we did something about it finally.
I've heard Curt and Matt Noah talking about foxholes, and this is not related to the errata, but it's just something I wanted to throw out there, especially if anybody had any feedback on it. In a campaign game, a lot of times you run around digging foxholes because you need a strategic location. It's our contention that at the end of every day, basically, when dudes are in the field, not when they're in a village or in buildings or well, obviously buildings, but that environment. But if they're in the outdoors, like Sam Marigleese, when you're out in a field, that at the end of the night, you're digging a foxhole.
You dug in.
You dug in. So Matt and Curt were suggesting a possible rule in Hazel's that, at the end of a CG day, in the open or in woods, maybe automatically can gain a foxhole.
Guys in entrenchable, well, yeah, basically you would acquire foxholes equal to the MMC equivalent of units in the hex if you were in entrenchable terrain, because that's what guys did. They dug in at night. So to get rid of that, I don't want to say it's sleazy, but the ahistorical, I believe, use of MMCs running around digging foxholes in completely obtuse locations to link together strategic locations and a perimeter.
Well, I hear what you're saying. And, that makes sense in a historical campaign game where foxholes are not strategic locations, right? If you can just put a strategic location anywhere you want, that's really not the way the campaign games are designed. I mean, you could design one like that, I guess, but and then they don't. There are certainly campaign games where foxholes are not strategic locations, and I guess you could have said, therefore, you could put as many foxholes as you have MMCs out there. There's some sense to that, but that's a designer's call, and you can't have both. You can't have foxholes wherever you want them and their strategic locations. That's just not going to work. I don't see how that would work.
We'll talk about this offline.
Yeah.
Back to the rules question. Okay, so the first big one, foxholes. Second big one was?
Various little things we did about vehicle bypass freezes.
Freeze sleaze, which I don't think is a sleaze personally, but that's okay.
Well, I agree 100%, but we also felt that there were a couple of small things we could do. And one of the suggestions was, pretty much just to do away with it altogether, I think. We did a couple of small things, and one of them was to require that the vehicle be in your location. If they're bypassing a building and you're in the upper level of that building, vehicle can't be in your location and they're not going to freeze you. And then we made it a little bit easier for street fighting -1s to apply to in various different cases against the vehicles that were
made it more lethal, a little bit more lethal, yeah, which it should be.
Which is fine. I mean, that's a good way to deter people from doing it because you're a lot more likely, or at least a little more likely, to lose your vehicle.
And a -1 is not a small thing when you're rolling 6-sided dice, honestly.
And so that and the entrenchment rule have more universal application than this next one. And this next one is actually a little bigger change, but it doesn't have the universal application. And that was not vehicle, but flamethrower to kill procedures. None of the usual modifiers to a 2-hit roll apply to a flamethrower to kill. There is no 2-hit. And it just seemed to many people, including us, that it was too easy to kill a vehicle with a flamethrower. If you were enshrouded in smoke, that didn't matter. If the vehicle was moving, that didn't matter. If you were a moving vehicle with a flamethrower, that didn't matter. And there aren't a whole lot of scenarios with flamethrowers versus vehicles, but in the ones that there are, that's kind of a big change. And we felt it was a worthwhile change to make.
I'm not gonna lie, I'm really surprised that we made that change, because the first time I ever met and played Perry, he actually took out one of my Panthers with a flamethrower. And I was already trying to concede the scenario, and Perry literally was like, no, you can't concede. I've never done this before, and popped up a hip Russian 628 and flamethrower and took out my panther with a point blank rear shot. I will never forget that because he literally made me keep playing a game. I said, no, it's over. You clearly have won. And he wouldn't let me quit the game just so he could kill my tank with a flamethrower.
And you actually mentioned something, Perry, that I've had discussions with, and I'm curious about your take on it because you and I have talked about it. We haven't talked about it in depth, but one of the factors in rule changes that I'm sure you weigh, and I'm curious, and I think players want to know how much you weigh it in, is changing a rule that potentially affects balance on previously printed official scenarios. I've heard you talk about at times. I think you think it's going to be potentially monumentally impactful or hardly impactful. But I'm curious to know, when you take it into consideration, when you sit down with Klaus and you say, okay, listen, this is legit, let's talk about it, how much of your mind is on how will this impact the stuff that's already out there?
So all changes are going to be impactful. And the question is how much? And it's not a number one consideration, right? Because all changes are going to be impactful. And if we think it's going to, change lots and lots of scenarios, a lot, then I'm more reluctant to do it. But and I don't think that the changes we made, like I said, the flamethrower to kill, it's going to make a big change in a few scenarios. And the other two changes, I think, are going to make small changes in a lot of scenarios. And so I would like to stay away from changes that make a big change in a lot of scenarios.
I think it's a non-issue. I honestly do. When we redid the map artwork for way back when there was 75 maps, not 100 like there is now, we could not guarantee that line of sights that used to exist still exist. And we just came to the conclusion and publicly told people, old maps are gone. These are the new maps. These are line of sights. It is what it is. Because it's just, there's no way to make it 100% perfect. Now, the rules and stuff is a little different, but if you want to make the change, it's going to affect something. These are ripples in a pond. Something's going to happen. So maybe that makes a scenario slightly less interesting because now you have fewer opportunities to kill an AFV with a flamethrower. Personally, I think it's just such a minute amount of change, and it will make the game better because it seems a little more realistic, if you want to use a realism argument. And it's just not going to do that much damage. I don't believe it. I don't see it. I said the same thing when the maps came out. And I remember the outcry, when the maps came out, that lasted for about a week. And then it went away and people were like, wow, this
The outcry, the cool thing is the outcry generally is limited to the same pool of human beings at every turn.
Well,
the map thing was a little wider, I think.
It was definitely wider, but I mean, we're grumpy old guys, thus the name We're Not Dead Yet. We're grumpy old guys and we don't like things to change.
And that is the closest to yet among the three of us. And I just go back to the maps, Braz, you're 100% correct about all that. But if we could have made them exactly the same, we would have, but we couldn't.
So Perry, this is something I've been asked by, I don't want to generalize. I don't want to say everybody, but more than 5 people, less than 100. And it's something that there's a lot of passion about, and that is ASL Rulebook 3.0. Some people are saying it absolutely has to happen because everything is broken and it's so disorganized, yada, 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 yada. And then other people are saying, and having been involved in the 2.0 and what that entailed, I'm curious to know, A, if you think there is going to be a 3.0, and B, if there is, what's going to be the focus of that effort?
Well, I certainly want there to be one. I can't sit here and predict that there's going to be one. One of the focuses is going to be on Chapter E because it's just messed up. There's so much stuff in Chapter E that, wasn't thought through. Well, there's not so much stuff that wasn't thought through. There is stuff that wasn't thought through, but there's lots of stuff that just isn't written well to play nice with all the rules. And obviously, Chapter E, I think, has a much bigger impact on the game than it did when it came out in Yanks. It still, has less of an impact on the game than, say, changes to the defensive fire rules. But
Could you see a scenario where Chapter E gets rewritten?
yes, and we were actually trying to do that back pre-pandemic, maybe during the pandemic, working with Pete Schellen on a Chapter E pack where we would, fix up the rules and they have scenarios that would then highlight these fixed rules.
Airdrop, fight, yeah, stuff like that, yeah.
And that just didn't work out. And the scenarios that Pete was working on, we just sort of adapted them and stole them and used them where other places.
We didn't really steal them, for the record. Pete got paid and compensated.
Well,
It's not to spread any rumors.
I saw that coming.
As the level-headed legal advisor, with no actual degree, there was no.
So I'm going to ask you a question, Perry, that no one's asked me to ask you, but this is absolutely just my question, personal question to you. If you were to sit down and say, okay, in the next journal, we're going to completely fix / rewrite / erraticize one body of the rules or one rule, what would that be for you?
that'd be the prisoner rules. Once again, I'm not going to sit here and say that's going to happen. If I wanted to, rewrite one section of the rules, it would be the prisoner rules. And Jim Bishop, who's pretty active in the ASL rules department, had an article on control in this last journal and an article on the OBA draw pile as well. He's offered to help try and rewrite those. A number of years ago, he said, "Oh, I can rewrite the prisoner rules for you." I said, "Great." And he gave me a collection of questions and answers that applied to it that did not rewrite the prisoner rules at all. And I think Jim realizes that now, and he's going to at least try and give it a shot, and we'll see where it goes.
I'm going to give you a McGrath. They're easily fixable. Anytime you take prisoners, you take the unit off the map and you delete a half squad from the guarding OB, and there you go.
That is easily fixable. You're absolutely correct. I don't think that's what players are looking for, but maybe I'm wrong.
I can tell you this, in the desert one, after all of the research and reading that I've done, it's gonna be almost that simple, in the sense that when the Italian units surrender, the British will delegate a half squad from a full squad, and they'll both leave the map. Because of the desert, obviously, it functioned very differently as a battlefield than most other places, and there are a litany of stories of Italians just marching to the British internment camp from the front line with one British guy walking them. But yeah, I just, that to me is a rule that has nowhere near the bang for the buck or the ROI that the complexity brings to the game.
If I had a vote, I would get rid of prisoners. I don't think they have any place in the game. But I'd also get rid of crew survival. I mean, all people do with crew survival is take the surviving crew and abuse the heck out of it, when in reality, it would run away. We all have stories of crews bailing out, carrying 6 Panzerfausts and taking out a half a dozen tanks. I guarantee that never happened in the history of World War II.
They never took out more than 2.
Never took out more than probably 1, because there's no room in a tank for a Panzerfaust, for Pete's sake. Let alone a case.
No, but it's almost one of those things, Perry, and I look at, and you and I have talked to you, and unfortunately you've brought me around to your side far more often than not when it comes to change in the understanding, being on the backside of it, understanding what that actually means. I've come to touch it with kid gloves in a lot of ways. You get into that, well, in real life, this would happen, and it's like, I've never loaded around in a tank, and I've never fired a shot in anger on a battlefield. So I can't tell you whether the VPM rule is historically accurate and all the things that go with that. And anybody that tells you that hasn't actually served in combat to me is full of shit anyways.
Well, I think most people understand that realism arguments have two sides, and you can't really win. One person will say this is realistic, and the other person will say no, 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 this is realistic. I think most people understand that. Just getting back to Perry first principles, one of the things I want to do is maintain playability. And so, Brian,
Yes, sir.
your two suggestions: get rid of prisoners and get rid of crew survival. I think that would help playability a lot. But those are the kind of things I think that are best served in a third edition. Getting rid of whole rule sections. And what you need to do, Brian, is write down all these great ideas you have instead of just throwing them out into the ether there where they disappear. You expect me to remember them? That's not going to happen.
It's not my job. I'm COO of the company. I'm not ASL rules guy.
So Perry, we're kind of hitting a back end timing wise. We're old and we have less attention span, but I would like anything you want to finish up with the journal, please do.
Okay.
And then I would like for you, as the Perry Says guy, to kind of give players an idea of what you're trying to, where you want to go next as far as the rules go, and what you think the next major move from your end might be.
Well, going back to the whole Journal 16 piece there, the one rule that I know that both you and Brian would have liked to see change is the repairing weapons rule. And certainly Mike and Steve feel strongly about that. I think Gary Fortenberry and Guy Cheney feel strongly about that.
By feel strongly, do you mean that they were on my side?
Yes.
Okay, just checking.
I mentioned this, Brian, when we were talking about it, that my major objection to that is that it really requires new counters. And I don't think that new counters make things more playable. And I would strongly prefer in some cases, to not issue new counters for rules changes, for rules of work. And that's this situation, in my opinion. And so that's one of the reasons why this change didn't get adopted.
I'm not going to argue with that because I know production-wise, counters are always a headache, getting the correct number of counter sheets and things like that. It's just not as easy to come up with like a half counter sheet of, hasn't yet repaired or whatever. The rule, in case you don't know, that Perry's talking about is there was a simple suggestion that fixing a broken weapon could happen at any time in the turn. And the point being, okay, my anti-tank gun's broken and rally phase comes and I roll a 3 and it doesn't repair. And now I can swarm that anti-tank gun at will. Whereas you might not do that if movement phase comes and I still haven't tried to fix that anti-tank gun and you start rolling that tank up and I go, well, okay, I'm going to repair it. Roll a 1 and now I've got a functioning anti-tank gun that could possibly do damage.
And I
liked it because I think it adds more tension to the game. I think it adds more
fog
and fog of war. It gets rid of some of the you can't see the map. But I entirely understand Perry's point of view because new counters are a pain in the ass.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I see both sides and agree with both sides.
I know when Curt and I play from now on, we're probably going to play that. We already play that way, in all honesty.
But you remember, right? You don't use a counter.
I don't use counters.
And you can't do that to the players.
I could.
Well,
I mean, I used to play with Dale Wetzelberger, and we would use dimes to represent, he prep fire, throw a dime on top of him. It's just whatever.
Well, I remember remember when he would drive Vinny Fratelli nuts about that.
Vinny was always wanting the actual counter. It's like, God, there's so many counters. Who cares? We'll remember.
One other point.
I'm a huge proponent of anything that adds fog of war to a game where the player has omnipresence. I just think it does. I think it adds to the playability of the game.
So the cool thing we did, I think this is the cool thing we did, is we could have thrown the ones that we didn't agree out and had much less content in the magazine. Instead, we left it in there. Try it. Play it as a house rule. See if you like it or not. I mean, there's some flexibility in this game. There's a group of guys right now online arguing that ASL shouldn't even be played competitively, and it's like, okay, everything I do is competitive.
Well, there's another thing online where they were talking about the advantage rule, which would be a great house rule. I don't think you can do that.
The what?
Advantage.
If you play area move games, there's a chit and it's the advantage, and somebody has it. So when you make a bad roll or something, you can play the advantage. It's a mulligan. And then you pass it to the other player, and then he has it. At the end of the game, they're often worth like a victory point, which is huge when you're playing Monty's Gamble, and it's 15 victory points to win. I don't remember off the top of my head. And, so sometimes guys will get that chit and just like put it back in the box and forget that they even have it. I'm a big fan of using that as many times as I can to fix bad dice rolls. Like when your sniper rolls a 1 to kill my 9-2, maybe I play the chit and you don't get a 1 sniper, you have to re-roll. That would be such an awesome rule for this game. But you can't do that now. 40 years in, these guys would have strokes. I mean,
that's a house rule.
That's 100% a house.
And it's a good one. To me, it would be, I would never play you with that because it would be a table flipping event. But same thing with third rate of fire die.
Third rate of fire die. That's a hot thing going on. I love it. I'm having so much fun playing with a third rate of fire die. And you've mentioned something. Whomever the Vassal guys are, and I know it's Doug Rimmer and a bunch of guys, and Rodney Kinney, I guess, is still involved somehow. For the love of God, guys, please put a table flip button on the bottom that I can press and all the counters like fly in the air and they can come back on the map. But it would be so cool if I had a table flip counter or a button. Yeah. Please, I'm begging you, put that in.
You mentioned about playing ASL competitively, and I'm 100% with you. I do it competitively. I have fun and I don't take it serious, but I'm competitive. When I do it. What's always sort of intrigued me, amazed me, surprised me about ASL is how nobody gambles on it. And so you were just talking about the advantage, and I thought about backgammon. You get the doubling cube if you were betting on ASL, but nobody does that. And you know what? I like the fact that nobody does.
I got bets at the World Championship. Ended up making a couple bucks, but
All right.
So my grand vision, I don't have a grand vision. I apologize. Maybe I ought to have a grand vision. MMP ought to sit down and make Perry have a grand vision, but I don't have one. I'm just going along, trying to, make things a little bit better every time. That's a little.
The grand vision, I think the grand vision, given our age and the time needed to do what would be required, I think, in my opinion, the grand vision would be the third and final version of the ASL rulebook. That would be the grand vision.
I agree.
And I agree, and I actually am very happy to hear you talk about it, because I think there are parts of the rules, like the prisoner rules, that you can take from 14,000 words down to a single rule paragraph and boot it. And there are other rules.
You can do that with the whole rule.
Well, hey, you could human wave. I mean, how many times has Mike McGrath told you the human wave rule is broken? In city maps, the human wave rule is broken. Okay, I'm played at human wave enough to understand and know why, but for somebody that's played the thousands of games he's played, I got, in my opinion, I got to listen to him. Probably got some pretty legit criteria behind that.
Somebody told me that Mike wanted to get rid of it in cities, or and Mike, if you're listening, I don't know if you are, but I apologize if I'm saying putting the wrong words in your mouth.
We'll have him on.
Can't get rid of it because, we've all seen Enemy at the Gates. There's human waves in city.
Right, but I think that they wanted, and we did it at the World Championship for the late war stuff. We made human wave NA. I think there was a period of time like Commissars where it stopped being a tactic the Russians openly used.
Right, but I think like in Red Barricades, there's plenty of times where human waves are useful.
And I 100% think, that new scenarios featuring 44, 45 Russians should make human wave NA, unless there was an actual human wave, or
right. Right.
But yeah,
Well, I know one thing. This one's running real long, and it's probably because Perry talks a lot. But he had some good stuff tonight, and
No,
we
appreciate
can
it, Pear.
actually break down into a shouting match, so that's awesome. And since this podcast software doesn't have a table flip button, I think we've run out of options. We're coming to the
What's our
end.
trivia?
Trivia. And I had a trivia question. It was pretty simple, but then it occurred to me, I have a better trivia question. Don't answer this. What scenario did Perry shoot a flamethrower to kill my panther? Okay? It is an official scenario. That's all I'm giving you. Which scenario? Perry, don't say it.
well, I'm not going to say it. I was going to suggest maybe tell him what tournament it happened in.
No, that's meaningless. I will throw a second piece out there. It is not in like a campaign game or something like that. It was
It's
an
a public. It's a
actual
public
down,
scenario.
Let's play a scenario, official
Yep.
public scenario, and quite frankly, one of my favorite scenarios. But there you go. What scenario did Perry kill my AFV, my panther, with a flamethrower, and make me wallow there after I tried to concede to make it happen? That's
It
the
was the beginning of a beautiful friendship.
It was a long time ago. I'm going to say that, and there you go. So dig through your scenario databases, look it up. And I don't think it'll be that hard actually if you do it that way.
Perry, it's good to finally get you on here, and we'll try and make it a pretty frequent thing. For all you guys watching, we're growing, and we thank you for that. Please hit the like, hit the subscribe button. I know some of you, are hesitant to do that, but it's an enormous help on our end, because eventually we would like this to be a kind of a revenue generating thing that will cost you nothing. But as a business, anytime we can offset expenses, then that gets translated to more affordable product. And I think hopefully you guys understand that that's one of the main goals behind running this company, is to get affordable war games that we put our blood, sweat, and tears into in your hands. So thank you guys for listening. Like, subscribe, share, and we will see you guys next week. Thanks, Pear.
Bye guys. Take care.